So I think we'll begin.
Yeah,
Okay, let's.
Okay. Hi everyone, welcome to the JavaScript Workshop where we peek into the language that has an identity crisis with this. I'm Amanda and together with me are Angelina and Ethan. So here's an overview of what we'll be covering today. So to some of you it might seem like there's a lot of content, but rest assured we'll be guiding you through them. And should you have any difficulties along the way, please feel free to clarify with any of the pursuits at the back or us. Yeah. Before we begin, we would like to say that due to time constraints, the content we'll be covering is very, very limited. So if you do encounter any things or questions along the way that we've not covered and that you would like to further explore, please Google. Yeah. So for those of you who are completely new to JavaScript, you might be wondering, what exactly is JavaScript? So JavaScript is essentially a versatile and high-level programming language that adds dynamic functionality and complex features like interactivity and animation to websites. The short form for JavaScript is JS, by the way, not Java. And then the roles in modern web dev, we have it's one of the core technologies of web dev together with CSS and HTML, and it allows developers to create a dynamic and interactive web page. It can be used for both front and back end. So before I continue, I'll be touching on the history and evolution of JavaScript from 1995 to 2015. So in 1995, JavaScript was integrated as a client-side scripting language, and in 1997, it was standardized as ECMAScript, which is basically a standard for scripting languages created to ensure the interoperability of web pages across different web browsers. In the mid-2000s, it established itself as an essential technology for front-end development alongside HTML and CSS. And fast forward to 2015, the 6th edition of the ECMAScript language specification, in short, ES6, brought about major improvements like classes and modules. So you might then be wondering, where is JavaScript used? Well, it's firstly used in client-side development, otherwise known as front-end development, to enhance user interfaces, inform validation, as well as animations. Secondly, it's also used in server-side development, also known as back-end development, using Node.js, which is a JavaScript framework for back-end development. And last but not least, in mobile apps, using mobile development frameworks like React Native. So for those of you who are more familiar with Python, you might be wondering, what's the difference between Python and JavaScript? Well, from this Venn diagram, you can see that while Python is used for back-end development, data and machine learning, JavaScript is used for both front and back-end development. And while Python runs in its own interpreter, JavaScript runs in web browsers or servers. And as for the similarities, both Python and JavaScript support object-oriented programming, which is OOP, which you can see on the screen here. And both are dynamically typed and are high-level languages. So as you can see from this image here, it's actually pretty common for people to think that JavaScript, the short form for JavaScript is Java, or to mix JavaScript and Java up. So like I mentioned earlier, actually the short form for JavaScript is JS, not Java. Okay, so I'll be comparing JavaScript with Java so you have a clearer understanding and hopefully not make the same mistake as whoever wrote the text in the image previously. So while Java is a statically typed programming language, JavaScript is a dynamically typed programming language. And while Java is class-based, JavaScript is prototype-based. And lastly, they have different file extensions with .java for Java and .js for JavaScript. And what's in common is the fact that both Java and JavaScript can run on a browser, amongst other similarities which are not shown here. Okay, so I mentioned earlier that JS is a dynamically typed programming language. And what dynamic typing is, in essence, is that when you declare a variable, you don't need to specify what type the variable is. And as for type coercion, it's the process of automatic or implicit conversion of values from one data type to another. These will be covered in more detail in the later slides by Ethan. Yeah. Okay, so now we'll be setting up the environment. If any of you have difficulties using or accessing VS Code or any other IDEs or replit, please sound out to us. Yeah. Okay, so
Does
everyone
have
okay?
access to your ID for your laptop?
Should be okay. So if you want to use the browser console, enter about:blank into the browser's address bar, then press Ctrl, Shift, and J to bring up the browser console. And Mac users is slightly different, so just refer to the screen there. Okay. So text editors and IDEs you can use include VS Code, Sublime Text, Notepad++, JS Fiddle, and Atom. And for online coding platforms, we have Replit and Playcode. Yeah. So now that you have hopefully set up the environment successfully, I'll be passing the time over to Angelina to cover variables and data types.
Okay, so let's move on to variables and data types. So variables, so let's talk about data types first, right? So data types in JavaScript, we have primitive and non-primitive data types. So for primitive data types, these are built-in data types and they represent single values. And another thing about primitive data types is that they're not mutable. So what mutability means is that like mutable data types, they can be accessed and changed after they've been created and stored in memory. And so unlike the non-mutable primitive data types, we have the non-primitive data types, which are mutable. So some examples are objects and arrays, which we'll be covering later on in our workshop. These non-primitive data types are usually used to store collections of values or like more complex entities, right? Okay, so these are some of the data types that exist in JavaScript. There are more and you can read up on your own, but these are the more commonly used ones, right? So for those who are completely new to programming, string is just a sequence of characters that are between like single or double quotes. So, and then for number, they are just, as you can tell, numbers. So unlike in Python, Python is separated into like integers and floats. But in JavaScript, they're all just numbers. And then Boolean is just true, false values. And null is like a value. A null and undefined, they may be a bit confusing at first, but null, you can just think of null as like a value and undefined as like a state. Or state of the variable is just undefined. Yeah. And for object arrays and functions, we'll be covering later on in the workshop. So quick quiz. You guys can just shout out your answers. What data type does each of these belong to? Anyone? That's correct. Okay. He said number, string, boolean, and string. So that's completely correct. So why this may be the case is, okay, why this true here, right? You see true. Just now I mentioned true and false. They're like boolean, right? But you can see here they have quotes around them. So that's what makes them a string. Okay, let's next talk about variables. So variables, you can think of variables as a box with a name. And so you can put things in the box, which are the values, right? So you can call later, you can retrieve them later on in the code and call on them so to use these values that are stored in the variables. So yeah. So although you can you can use the variable before you declare them. It is still considered a good programming practice to always declare before you use it. Yep. So there are 3 keywords that you can use to define your variables. So the first 2 you can see here is var and let. So var is what they had in JavaScript since like the start, and let was added later on. So now var isn't like used as much, as it may cause issues when you're debugging because of how it's function scoped, as you can see here. The variables declared by var is scoped to the immediate function body. So scoping will be covered later on as well. So for let, the variables are scoped to like the immediate encasing block. So the encasing block will be denoted by the curly brackets. And for variables declared by let, you cannot redeclare these variables, but the value can be reassigned. So for example, you use let x be 1 to declare the variable. But you want to change the value to, I don't know, 2. So you just write x equals to 2, just x equals 2 with single equals. Having double equals and triple equals means different things, by the way. Oh yeah, they can also both be declared globally. Okay, the third keyword you can use is const, right? So const is just short form for constant. So the variables cannot be redeclared or reassigned. And you use it when the value should not be changed. However, this does not define, like the const does not define like a constant value, but it's like a constant reference to a value, right? So for example, you have an object that you declare with const, right? Declare with const. So you can change like the elements, like the properties of a constant object. And you can also usually use const to declare like an array. So you can also change the elements of a constant array. So this is the syntax for declaring variables. It's pretty intuitive. You just take a quick look. You have the keyword and then the name of the variable and then the value. And then you can see here the objects are encased with curly brackets, and arrays are encased with square brackets. Okay, next let's move on to operators and expressions. So operators here, most of them should be pretty familiar with everyone because it's like basic math, right? So what may not be very familiar is maybe modulus. So what modulus means, or modulo in sometimes, it just means the remainder, right? So in this example, x, which is 10, and y, which is 5. So you have 10 modulus 5. So it's the remainder of 10 divided by 5, which is 0. So x mod y will be 0. So next, let's talk a bit about, let's take a closer look at increment and decrement. So you can see here that it just increases the value by, or decreases the value by 1, right? But the order of putting the increment and decrement matters. So let's take a closer look here. So here you have y plus plus, right? So y will increase by 1. But the increment sign is like after the y. So x will remain as 5. And then for this one, you can see the plus is before the a. So a will become 6 because it's plus, right? But then because the plus is before the a, the b will become 6. So the b will also increase. So the same applies to decrement, like the minus minus. So yeah. Is there any questions so far? Okay, let's move on to control structures. So what a control structure is a way to specify the flow of control in the program. So it analyzes and it will choose what it will do, the program will do based on like the parameters and like conditions. So if it's met, it will do this. If it's not met, it will do that. So in like layman terms, it's just logic, right? Okay, this is just some of the control structures we have in JavaScript. So we'll be talking about if else, switch, for loop, while loop, and do while loop. So let's talk about the conditionals first. So conditional, the if else and switch case statements, they are used quite interchangeably, right? The use cases are pretty similar. And but for if else, it's evaluated for each if statement, and for switch is it's an expression that test with, and like the expression, the condition is only evaluated once. So let's take a look at the code example. So here you can see if else. You have the number which is 10, negative 10, sorry. So it will first check if the number is greater than 0. You can see that the condition is encased in parentheses, sorry. Yes. And then because this condition is not met, it'll move on to the next part, else. So what this code will do when this happens, right? It will console.log, and it will give you the number is negative because negative 10 is not greater than 0. What is not shown in the previous slide is there's else if, which is comparative to elif in Python. So it's okay. So for example, you have three possibilities, right? So you just check for one, and then if it's not met, can write else if, and then you have another condition, and they'll check for that, and if it's still not, it'll just run the else. So this is some example code for switch. You can see here you have a number which is 5. So it will check for case 0, case 1, and case 2. So, and since the number is not 0, 1, or 2, it will go to default, which is the number is greater than 2. So next, let's talk about the for and while loops. So for and while loops, they're functionally quite similar, as JS is not a compiled language. But using, they're still slightly different, and it'll take a bit of time and more coding to get to know which one you're supposed to use at the right time. And after a while, you'll become intuitive. But usually for loops, you know how many times the loop will be running for. So, and usually you'll have an incrementing value. So you'll have it run for a certain amount of times, or you have it run until and then you'll run until the condition is evaluated, it's not met. So, and then for while loops, you usually don't know how many times the loop will run for, and then it will the while loop will just keep running until the condition it's checking for is false, right? And usually for loops, they'll usually have a variable that you set in the you set a variable in the for loop itself, and for while loops, usually set a variable there which you'll be checking the condition for outside. So for while and do while loops, they sound pretty similar, and they're similar in the sense that you also don't know how many times it runs for. But for do while loops, the code will be run before the condition is evaluated. So, for example, you have a do while loop, and the condition is false from the start. So the code will run the what is in the loop once, and then it will check. So if it's already false, it will then just never run again, just run once. But for while loops, if the condition is false at the start, it'll just never run because it will check the condition before running the code. So this is an example of a for loop. I apologize. Okay. Here you can see you have the variable I here, which will be 0 at the start. And for every time the for loop runs, it will increase. It will increase by 1, and it will run until I is less than 5. Oh, sorry. It will run while I is less than 5, and so you just run console.log number is I, right? So you can see here, 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So they'll just keep running until it is not less than 5. So, and then you'll just console the log loop is finished, right? So this is the while loop. You can so this is a while true loop, which means it's infinite. You just keep running. Yeah. Make sure you know what you're doing when you use a while true loop. If not, your computer may crash. Yeah. And then this is a do while loop. Yeah, you can as you can see, it will run the what is here in this encased by the curly brackets, and then it will check for this, and this is what it will show. Okay, next let's talk a bit about objects. So since in JavaScript, objects are basically everything. So all what that means is every type of value in JavaScript except the primitives like number, string, and boolean. They are all objects. The rest of them are all objects. So objects, they are mutable, which means they are addressed by reference and not by value. So in this example here, you can see if x equals to person, x is not a copy of person, but it's called x is person itself, which is another name for person. So any changes that you make to x will result in a change in person. So objects are a type of variable and they can contain different values. And these objects will have properties. And these are the properties, right? And then this is the name of the property and then the property, right? So what this is an object literal. So it has name value pairs, which is in the curly brackets. Spaces and line breaks are not important for objects. You can see here. This you can have it spanning multiple lines, and it will give you the same object as this, whereas on one line. So if you have many name value pairs that you want to have in the object, you can have it span multiple lines to make it easier for your future boss or whoever is also reading your code to see. You can also add the name. Can also add the name value pairs after you initialize and you define the object. Then see here, you can add this in to an empty object here. Okay, you can see previously that I assessed the object, I can assess the object in two ways, right? Usually, previously I used it this way, which is the name of the object followed by the name of followed by the name of like the property. I apologize. Okay, so here you have it in square brackets as well. Like arrays, which we'll be talking about later, the new keyword can be used for readability and execution speed, but usually don't use this unless like you're using you're making a constructor function. So a constructor function in short is just when you want to have many very similar objects and you just have one function to just keep making it, right? So this objects can also be a property value of an object. So you can see here, you have an object languages inside this object, my object. Yes. Okay. Let's talk a bit more about arrays. So arrays, they are a way to store a collection of items that are under a single name. So variables of different types can be the element in this array, and can stuff like object, function, and array all can be the elements of the array. So arrays are usually declared with const like objects, and the items are separated by commas. And just like objects, the line breaks also do not affect the declaration. So both here, spanning multiple lines and and just one line, it will give you the same array with different name, of course. Yeah, the names are different here. Like objects can also add items to an array after declaring the array. And there is this way to make the array, which is called like the new array method. Does the same thing, but no one ever uses it. So unless you have a really good reason to use it, just don't use it. So how do you get array elements? Array elements have this thing called the index. It's like in your class you have the index numbers, right? But these index numbers they start from 0. So you see here, start is like the first element of this array, but its index number is 0. So let's give an example of a really, really long array. But you want the last one. Yes, you can use the length minus 1, but you can just use -1 as like the index of the final element. This is used like when you want to get like the last few elements. So the specific item in the index can also be changed like this. Yeah. So after if you print cars like console.log cars after this, it will be Opel, Volvo, and then BMW. Right. Okay. So like I mentioned previously, all values except primitives are objects in JS. So which is why the type of operator will return the array as an object. However, these arrays are still best described as arrays because arrays, right, they have index numbers, and what's inside they are assessed by these index numbers and not a named value. So these are some array methods that you may come across. There are many more, and there are many other methods that you can use, and we have linked MDN web. I believe it's MDN web docs. It's MDN web. We have linked the MDN web docs to the other array methods in our slides, which you can find in the Discord server under resources if you have not found it by now. Yeah. So some usual ones you see is array.length, array.sort, array.push, and there's just many more. Okay. JavaScript does not support associative arrays just now I mentioned. So if you use name keys, it will use name. So like if you use indexes, the JS will redefine the array as an object. Okay. Is anyone lost? Is everyone following? Okay. Then let's move on to functions. Okay, so functions. A function is a block of code that is designed to perform like a particular task, right? So, and this function will be executed when something calls on it. So as you can see here, here's an example of a function to calculate the area. So you have, these are the parameters, width and height, which are set in the parentheses. And so if you leave these parameters empty when you call on this function, it may return the code may return an incorrect answer. So please take note and be careful when you code. Yes. And then here you can see the body of the function. These are like the code to be executed when you call on the function. And then they'll stop executing when it reaches the return statement here. You can see. Okay, so just now I mentioned accessing functions with like when you don't fill in the parameters when you set them. So if you that means leaving the brackets empty. If we just access the functions without the brackets at all, it will just return the function. You can see here, you have console.log greet, which is this function right here. You don't put the brackets, right? It will just give you the code of greet. These functions can also be used as variable values. And just take note that variables created inside a function is local to the variable. Okay, we have a quick practice time here. I will be giving you about 15 minutes to make a function to compare like two numbers. If you guys can use your VS Code or Replit or whatever IDE to make this. And if you have any questions or face any problems, you can come up to any of us or the facils at the back. Yep. Um, in case just now it wasn't clear enough, I just meant to compare which one is greater than, less than, or if it's like equal. Yeah.
In case anyone wants any direction, just look at the slides that we sent you and then see how to make a function so that you can compare the numbers.
But so many windows. This is what I do. This is bad. I should rename this. I don't know. I still never. I don't want to learn. None of my I think following instruction is fine. Okay, for those who couldn't run the code, could you go to the node.js website? Node.js, yeah. That's yeah. Is it? It's not. Okay. Yes, is this node.js.org? Go here and then you follow the down. You can go and follow the download instructions. Um, if you guys cannot, oh, it doesn't zoom in here. Oh. This is the website to go to if you need to if you cannot run and you need to, yeah, you need to download Node.js. It doesn't need to run code there. Wait, let me get him down here.
The link to download the node.js is also in the Discord if you need.
Is is this any is this anyone struggling to download Node.js? Okay, I assume everyone should be okay for now. Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna give you guys your answer first, right? The suggested answer. It doesn't have to be exactly the same, but this is just a suggested answer. Yep. So this is a suggested answer. You can see you have the function, and then you'll compare variables a and b. So for those values that I gave, you have this, right? Also here I'm missing my semicolons, which is not good. Please put your semicolons. Please put your semicolons. This although JavaScript does help you add them, please remember them. Don't be like me, please. Yeah. Oh yeah. Okay. If you wanna see what it does after running, this is what the console.log will give you after running the code. Yeah. Okay. So we'll be moving on to JavaScript peculiarities, which will be covered next by Ethan.
All right, hello. If you're still following, here's JavaScript peculiarities, which is what's so special about JavaScript, right? What must you take note of in JavaScript? So we have dynamic typing and type coercion, which is also mentioned by them earlier. And what they mean is that dynamic typing is variables can hold values of any data type. And the type of a variable can change during the runtime of the JS code, which is during the development when the code is running. Yes, so during deployment, when the code is running. So yeah, it is a quite high level programming language. It is on, uh, it is like Python, it's dynamic typed, and it is very useful. Next is type coercion. And I want you to look at this especially. It's the automatic conversion of values from one type to another, all done by JavaScript. What that means is, okay, let me first bring you to truthy and falsy values. What are truthy, falsy values? Basically, you know, there's so many types of data, right? There's like string, there's like numbers, there's like boolean, and they can actually all represent a boolean value, aka true or false. As you can see in the examples, one, if you compare with loose inequality, if you lose equality, one and for example true, then it will return true, which means that one is equivalent to true in the loose equality. What that means that one is a truthy value. And in the same sense, strings that are not empty are also truthy. So if you compare, if you write hello world equals true, it will think that it's equivalent. It will return true. That means hello world, the non-empty string, will be equivalent to the true value in Boolean. Yes. And also all objects and arrays, they are also considered truthy, which is the same thing as just now. Now, what are falsy? Falsy is on the other side, on the opposite end. It is 0, minus 0, 0, negative 0. Null, null is also falsy. Undefined, the state of being undefined for a variable also makes it falsy. So if you, for example, want to compare an undefined variable with true, it will say that it is not equivalent because it is equivalent to false. It is false, it is undefined. And also empty string is also undefined. Empty string is also falsy, and also NaN is also falsy. But you might ask, what is NaN? Well, NaN is not a number. It stands for not a number, and it is a special value in JavaScript that indicates an undefined or unrepresentable numerical result. Basically, when you do some funny thing with your operations, if you get a funny non-number result that you cannot represent in the code, it will return NaN, which is not a number, which is also falsy. So if you see NaN, sometimes you have to check out your code if your code is doing something wrong. Yeah. So, and then now let's talk about type coercion for you. So as I have mentioned just now, JavaScript will regard a truthy or falsy value as a boolean if you use the loose equality, which is the double equal sign. And what that does is that 5 plus the string 5, so number 5 plus string 5 will give you a string concatenation, which is 5, 5 in string. So that's also what the type coercion does. And if you also see just now 0 equals false, it will means that 0 is equivalent to false, which means it coerces the types. It aggregates the types, and it's like agar, and it's like, oh, these two types, these two values of different types, they are the same thing. They are essentially the same thing when you put it into Boolean, which is true or false. But there is another comparing thing that says equals. Triple equal sign will compare the two values very strictly. So what that means is that it will compare both the type and the value of the two things you're comparing. For example, if you're comparing the same thing, 0 equals false, will that return true or false? That will return false, because 0 is type number, and false, the type of false is Boolean, and number is not Boolean. So in that case, in the strict equality, it will regard it as not equal. Yeah. So please always choose the most suitable equality operator. And if you're experimenting just now with the if else and the comparing number statement, you will see that if you do equals or equals, sometimes the values are different. Now let's talk about scope. What is scope? Yes, scopes, different scopes, they have different visibility or accessibility of variables in your code. What that means is how much of your code can see each other. It's a bit abstract, but if you look at the examples, you will know. For example, the global scope is the outermost scope, and basically, if you open your file, if you open your JavaScript file, and then you type anything in it, you're typing in the global scope. It is the biggest scope and what encompasses everything. And then you have the function scope, which is when you define a function. You've defined a function just now, so it's like function, like function something, and then everything that's encased inside the function is the function scope. And block scope is the smallest. Block scope is whatever that's encased inside curly brackets. Or for example, if statements, for statements, whatever's inside those statements, they are inside the block scope. Here's a diagram. The global scope is the biggest, and then we have function scope, and then we have block scope. Why that matters is because in JavaScript, we can encounter something like this, which is very funny, but it is a valid thing. So we define let x equal 5 in the global scope, and we define let x equals to 3 in the block scope. Can anyone tell me what x will be when you alert it? 5, 5, 3, 3, 3. Show of hands who thinks it's 5. Come on, don't be shy. 5, 5, 5. Okay, show of hands who thinks it's 3. Why? Because it's more recent. Why is it 3? Is it 3? Who thinks it's 3? Okay, I think more people think it's 5. So it is 5. The answer is 5 because it is defined in the global scope. The let x equals 5 is defined at the outermost scope, and your alert is also placed in the global scope. So what that means is that you are calling from the global scope and the code sees it as 5. But if you alert the x, if you place the alert into the curly brackets, it will mean that it's inside the block scope. And if it's inside the block scope, it will say that it will alert 3. Yeah. So please take note, the scopes are very different and you have to take note. Now, hoisting. What is hoisting? Hoisting means that the functions or variables can be called before the declaration is in the code. So for example, you have your JavaScript file, right, everyone? So you have a function. For example, you have let's just show it. You have initiate BBCS. Define code before you define what the function is, before you declare what the function is. In other languages that might not work, but in JavaScript that works because the JavaScript, it automatically places the function up to the declaration of the function up to above the calling of the function. So this calling of the function will work. And yeah, but variable hoisting is different from function hoisting. What variable hoisting does is that at the top of the code, the variable exists if you declare what the variable is, right? But the value of the variable at the top of the code before your assignment of variable will be undefined, and only until you assign that variable it will be assigned a value. So if you so for example, if you define if you do like console log x and then let x equals 5, right? What will come out in the console is it will say x is undefined because it has hoisted the declaration of x, but not the value assignment of the x itself. So that is something that's funny. But as good practice, always just declare and also assign your variables before you call the variables themselves. Yep. Now, moving on to the bulk of this thing, this keyword. What is the this keyword? We've known that it has an identity crisis with the this keyword. And what is the this keyword, right? It refers to the current execution context inside the GS code. What all that bunch means is that this refers to an object. Okay, this keyword refers to different objects depending on how this keyword is used, because it refers to the current execution context. It is most typically used in the object methods, where this refers to the method that the object is attached to, thus allowing the same method to be reused on different objects. What that means, we will explain later. And if you want, you can type in this link, and you can scroll through the tutorial as I talk about this, because it can make it clearer if you want to. Right, I'll give you like 10 seconds to type it in.
You can just open the slides and click on the link as well. Yes.
That works. Yes, that works. All right. So what is this? This, okay, it looks quite intimidating, and to a lot of JS people, to a lot of JS developers, it really is. But let's put it simply. This is the object in most cases, most if not all. And in an object method, this refers to the object alone. This refers to the global object, and function, global object, blah, blah, blah. Let's move on to the examples and see what actually it is. Okay, so this, as you can see, can you find this in this chunk? It's in this dot value. So what that does is that in the object method, it will refer to the object itself. So for example, when you're making an object, you're creating an object, constant object, and then you will, when you do things with that object, you can write this, and that will refer to the object itself. For example, if you want to add properties to it, then you can do this dot value or this dot property or whatever thing that you want to change it to. And for example, in function, it will refer to the global object as you have seen earlier. And in the function, you see function show this, console log this, that this will be the object that you define at the start. It will be that console log object get value. So it will refer to the global object in the global scope. Next, we'll have apply or call invocation. And what is that is, what all that means is that when you are doing a function, for example, you're doing a greet call user, and that user object has a name Bob. You see, user name Bob, right? And in the function, it's using the name of the object, of the name property of the object. So what this does in this case, it will refer to that object basically. Yep. And finally, constructor invocation. Wow, that looks difficult. What is that? This refers to the instance of the object being created by the new keyword. What that means is that when you're using a constructor function, which I will talk about later, this will refer to the new thing that you're creating. And that changes us to constructor functions. What are constructor functions? Okay, constructor functions are, let me tell you what constructor functions are. They are a special type of functions in JavaScript that are used to create and initialize objects. What that means is that you are making, okay, think of a stamp. You're carving out a stamp, right? So you carved out the stamp, and then you want to make different entries of different things using that stamp. And that stamp can say like name equals, date equals, age equals something, right? And then when you want to create many objects with that stamp, you just stamp, 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 object created, object created, object created. So you will make many objects with the same blueprint, and that is what is useful about constructor functions. So it can define a blueprint for creating multiple objects with similar properties and methods. And they are also conventionally named with a capital letter. As you can see in the example at the right, it will have user with capital U. And if you go to the next, yes, if you go to the next, an example of this would then be function person, and then in that will be the parameters and the age. So what is going on here is that we're making a function. So a constructor function is a function, right? And what that constructor function does is that it makes a new object that is a person, as you can see at the green, as the green thing, and that has the two properties, name and age. So you use this dot name to write the name, and then this dot age to put in the age. And when you're making a new person object, you will have const user equals new person. So you're making a new person, right? You're making a new person object with that stamp. So in that, you're doing stamp, that's a new person. And what's the name? The name you're filling in yourself is a separate entry. So it's that name. And then the age will be that age. And then you will create that object. And when you call that object, when you console log it, you will see that it is actually a person object with, it's a literal object, right? It will have the name, the age, that age. Yeah. And if you, see, there will be a new keyword when we're creating that object. Why? Because you want to create a new object that is with that blueprint. And what you do is that you add the new keyword. So take note, you have to add the new keyword to add to make constructor functions, to call constructor functions. So why use constructor functions, you might ask? Because during object creation, you don't want to repeatedly say like, oh, for example, const object, and then, oh, name and age. And then when you're making a new one, you write const object name age, const object name age. That is very, very clunky and repetitive. So what you want to do is you use that blueprint at the previous slide, and you use the blueprint and you make many, many different copies of the same similar object. And also, it's very clear for the code. It also has prototypal inheritance, which means it has the same structure, and it is flexible, and it is all that. So I would strongly recommend you use that instead of repeating different things. That's the usage of one of the main usages of this. Now, what are you going to do with DOM manipulation? What does this mean? Is that, okay, most of you, I believe, have went to the HTML CSS workshop just now, and you have learned that you can make a HTML document that can display like a web page, and then the CSS to define the styles, right? So what can you do with all of that? All of that is a static web page. And if you want to do anything to the web page and, like, for example, change things around, you have to go into the source code and actually change the properties, like the styles, whatever. But in JS, in real life, in practicality, you can have a much simpler way of having the user to control and letting the user interact with the web page to see changes, to make changes to the web page, instead of just going into the source code and changing everything bit by bit. How you can do that is, is changing the DOM. So what is the DOM? The DOM is the document object model, not anything else. And it is the programming interface for web documents. And it is an API that represents the structure of the web page as a tree of objects. What that means is that you have, for example, the HTML, right? And then you remember there's head, there's title, there's body, and there's paragraph, and there's all of those things. And what is DOM is that DOM will represent it as the structure, a very simplified structure of what you can see in the web page. Yes. What is in the DOM structure is the node, for example. The node is the building block of the DOM structure. Each part of the document is a node, and then there are many types of nodes. There are the element nodes. So the element nodes are the elements themselves. For example, the body, the div, the paragraph P, the span, so on, so forth, right? And then the text nodes, they are the text within the elements. So for example, you have a paragraph element, and you have the words in the paragraph, like I love BBCS, right? And that I love BBCS will be the text node. And then what are attribute nodes? Attribute nodes are the CSS part of it. For example, you have classes, you have the IDs, and those are the attributes of the nodes. And the hierarchy is just a parent-child relationship, which means you have a big thing and then enclosing a smaller thing. For example, body, then inside the body there will be paragraph, or body, inside the body there will be div, and then paragraph, for example. So it's like a parent-child relationship. So the parent is the bigger body, and the child will be the things that are inside those things. Yep. All right, what about the DOM structure? The DOM structure is firstly dynamic, and what you can do is that you can change the content and the structure of the DOM without reloading the page. And that is very convenient because you can just go into JavaScript, change the DOM around, and the user will see it changing in real time. And it is interactive because the user can just interact with the web page and do whatever you coded to change it to. And then lastly, you can make web apps. And web apps are very useful because you're building responsive things and you want the user to be able to interact with the things. Now, okay, how are we going to put the JavaScript code into your HTML? That some might ask. And that is through the script tag, all right? So you will have the script, and then we'll have the, if I'm not wrong, it will be the href. Please Google script JavaScript in HTML, and then you will know how to put it into your HTML. That putting that will make sure your script goes into your HTML, because you have a few files, right? You have the HTML file, you have the CSS file, you have the script file, which is the JavaScript file. So you want your JavaScript file to run when you run your HTML file, when people see your HTML file. How you do that is that you use the script tag. But there are two options of where you put the script tag. Where can we put the script tag? You know the head of the HTML, and there are also, you can put it at the final place at the last part, but the bottom of the body. So there are pros and cons. And if you put the script in the head, that would mean that the script will run before everything is loaded, and it will execute immediately. And it's good if you want to do something that's like, for example, running some non-animation things, running some registering the user, for example. And if you want to put it before the body, which is at the final bits of the code of the HTML DOM, then it will be, for example, animations or like loading in different pictures or the other things, and that will be for heavier files. And it is generally recommended that you put the script tag at before the /body closing tag, and because it improves the load performance, and the users can see the elements inside the HTML before your JS loads in, and that's sometimes good. Yeah, right. Now, if you put your script in the head, do take note, you want to put in an event listener that recognizes your DOM content is loaded, then plays the script file, then runs the script file. So just to take note, that is something that you can do. If you're putting it in the script, if you're putting the script in the head, then please come back to refer to this. If not, please put it in at the end, like, the HTML file. Please open the HTML file, by the way. Go to HTML file, go to before the /body and put in script, and then refer it to the JavaScript. Yeah. Now, okay. Now you are in your JavaScript, right? What are you going to? Okay, because just now you've learned like how JavaScript sort of works, right? The basic grammar of JavaScript, right? Everyone okay? All right. I'll give y'all like 5 seconds to open and get ready your like JavaScript file, a new JavaScript file. And yeah, all right, come. You guys can do this. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, now that you have your JavaScript file, you want to do things with the things in the HTML file, right? For example, you have a web page. Let's just go to any web page. All right, let's go to say come, anyone give me, let's go to Google. Right, you see Google. Let's go to inspect elements. I'm just gonna see, you don't have to do this. So you see inspect element, you see the Google logo. How do you want to interact with this Google logo if you were a coder for JS in Google? You are going to go to the JS and you have to relate this Google logo into the JS. You have to put it into the JS file, right? How do you do that? And how you do that is you go back to the selection. Whoa, how are you going to put the element in the HTML into your JavaScript? It's by selection. So you type in your JavaScript, document.get element by ID, and then the ID of that thing. So doing that will let you select that element in JavaScript from a HTML. Yeah. So for example, what you want to do is, for example, you const start button. So if you have a button in your HTML, you const start button and then document get elements by ID, get the start button by the ID. Yeah. And then these are just a few selection things. I will not, actually, yes, I will go through them in detail. Yes. So what are these things, right? They are selection tags. This thing is the document get elements by tag name. So you know tag names? Tag names are the paragraphs, divisions, divs, for example, body, for example, span, all of these things, they are tag names. So what you're doing is that you're going in your JavaScript and you are grabbing all of these elements with that tag name from the HTML, and you're putting them as one list, as one HTML collection inside your JavaScript, so that you can do things to them in your JavaScript. And then the next one is the get elements by class name. It also grabs multiple elements, all of the elements that has the class name. So for example, you've learned CSS, Tailwind CSS just now if you went to Tailwind CSS. But if not, it basically grabs all of the classes. It grabs all of the elements that have that class. For example, if you want class container, if you want to get all the elements that have the class name container, then you just use document get elements by class name container. And then query selector is a slightly more advanced but very useful selector if you want to do if you want to pick things out in JavaScript. So for example, you have in your CSS, right? You're doing dot class, right? For example, dot hello dot container, or for example, yeah, or dot container dot child, or all of these selectors that you may or may not have learned. Then you will have to use query selector, and it's a very specific selector that selects the first element in the HTML and puts in your JS. And then we have the query selector all, which is it basically selects all of the elements that match the selector. Now, okay, now this might require some demo. So let's come and I will show you what we do in this. Okay. For example, we have content manipulation in sense that you want to change the inner HTML of an element. So you go into VS Code, and what you want to do, I would do this on the fly. I will do this right now. It's okay. So what you have is I need the Canva. What's it?
Canva?
Yes, Canva. The slides. Yes. Slides. Thank.
No, which slides? Just not.
Sorry. You do.
You want to?
Oh, all right. Thanks. Yes. So we want to see, for example, a button in the HTML. So what we want to do first is, okay, let's pretend that is different. Can you open the VS Code? And a new file. And then test.js. Right.
Yes,
All right. So now we're in test.js, right? What I'm gonna do is that I'm going to write const button, right, equals to, for example, we do document.get element by ID bracket start button, right? So we have that. So now we have the button in our JS. Our JS knows what a button is. Whoa. Okay, what do you want to do with the button? For example, you want to change the text in the button. All right. Okay, so what you want to do with the button is that you can do, for example, you change the text inside a button. So you can do button.text content equals to something, right? If that will allow me, equals to, sure, let's do join BBCS. Join BBCS. And if you have a HTML file and you run this JavaScript code, the button text will become join BBCS. Yeah, that's how you basically do it inside the JS. If you link up your JS with a script to your HTML. All right, next. This is creating a text node. I don't usually use this, but you can do this. If you do document.create text node, and then it will just make a new text node. It will make a new node that has text. Okay, can. Yeah, so next we can also do other things that are not text nodes, which is, for example, you can make new elements inside the JS. So you have those elements that you already have in your HTML, but then you want to add new things into it. So you do this. Create element, tag name. Yeah, so for example, you want to make a new division inside your thing. So let's do, wow, let's do this. Yes, okay. For example, you want to make a new new thing. Yeah. Right. Okay, so you want to make a new division or a new button, and then you would just have to do new button equals to document dot create element button if it allows me. Wow. So if you do that, it will make the element button. Yes? But then that is not enough because it only creates the button and puts it inside the DOM. Oh, sorry, it's a bit small. Let me make it bigger. There we go. That only creates the button inside the node list, inside the DOM. But then you haven't added it. Oh, it only creates inside the JS, right? You haven't made it inside the DOM. So now you have to add it into the DOM by doing new button dot, or like, actually no. Oh my God. You do like body dot append child bracket new button. So what it does is that it adds the new button into your DOM. So then the new button will appear inside the body. Yay! So that's how you add something into it, just for your information. You can find it inside the slides and you can always refer back to it. And then insert before is also another way that you can insert something you've created into the DOM. Yeah. Okay, how do you delete elements? Guys, this is a bit dry, but please we can pull through. So how do you delete elements? You just do this, remove child, and then you remove the child node. So what it does is that you can do a parent element, then remove the child, and then you will remove the child element that is inside the parent element. And then if you want to remove an element from the DOM entirely, you just do something remove, and that method is just removes it. Now, if you want to change classes, okay, think about this. For example, you have a CSS, right? And then you have like classes you have a container, you have a division that has many classes, right? And then you want to change the classes on that container, on that division in HTML. How you do that is that you do button dot set attribute or division set attribute, and then the old class and then the new class. Yeah. Then you just, and then yeah, and you can do that. And then element dot get attribute is you can just get the attribute. You can get the value of the attribute. For example, if I want to get the attribute let's say width, then I would say const width value equals to button get attribute bracket width, and then the value will then be whatever the width is. Yep. All right, and then how do you want to modify the CSS styles? You can also do it in another way, which is take the element and then element dot style dot whatever property name. For example, the background color. For example, the padding. For example, margin. Then you would just do division. For example, dot style dot margin equals to something. Then you can change it directly from the JS. Right. Quick recap. So what have we gone through so far? What have we gone through? We have gone through how to work out the DOM, like what's in the DOM. The DOM is a tree of the structure in the HTML in the web page, right? And then how do you work out different things? For example, you want to add things, you want to change around the elements, you want to change around the styles. You can do that using JS, and all of that can be found in the section just now. Now, moving on to what you want to do to make it responsive, to make the JS interactive, to make the website interactive for the user to interact with. So that will require event handling. What is event handling? For example, you see a button, right, on the web page, and you know that if you've experimented around in your HTML class, that if you click the button, nothing happens because you didn't code something to the button that makes it do something. So now we will make it do something. Whoa. If you can, please follow along. Go into your JS, import that button, and then do the same thing. Button dot add event listener bracket click, and then you can make a function. All right. Yeah. What that basically does is that it acts a functionality to detect whether the button has been clicked or anything has been clicked, basically. And you can make it responsive. For example, you can make it console log button clicked or alert button clicked, or make it have an image appear or do anything. And basically, it handles that event. Yep. And you can also um, do it as such. If you define a function in JavaScript beforehand, you can do button.addEventListener, and then the event, in this case is mouse over, or it can be clicked, as you can see, or as you can see over here. Then you can just call that function, and then the function can just run when you call that function. Yeah. If you want, you can see the full list of events that includes like on focus, like focus, hover, blur, click, all of that. You can also use that to manipulate your JS. And then these are some common events. There's click, double click, mouse over, mouse out, key down, blah, 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 blah. And yeah, the full list of events is here. You can check it out. And then, yeah, please try out the event handler, like event handling, which is basically add event listener. And it can detect whenever something has been pressed or any state changes to your HTML elements. Yep. Do y'all want to? Do y'all want some time to try out? Yes, yes, yes. I assume yes. Okay, all right. Let's try it. Come, come. If you have an HTML, please open it up and put that element in the HTML into the JS. Yeah. Sorry. No demo. Okay, let me write down one. Then and think. Actually, screw it. Let's do a demo. Huh? I realize. Okay, how about this? Let's do this. No, 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 no. Oh, okay. Can you connect this? Oh no. Can you make a open? Actually, I'm like, do this. Okay, I'm just gonna code it with y'all, just so that it's more guided in a sense. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. Right. So please bear with me as I struggle through this. Right. Let's put a button. Click me. Right. You have a button that has ID equals to click, and then go into your scripts. Actually, yeah, it's okay. It's okay. So yeah, in your HTML, you have something like this, right? I assume. And then you have an ID, something with an ID. And then how are we going to do that in your JavaScript? Right, in JavaScript, we are going to use a selector. And we're going to do, for example, const click button equals. Click. Write that down. Yep. So you're gonna have this, and this is what we're gonna do. Okay, I'm gonna make it so that make it so that when you click it, there's something gonna happen, right? Element dot add event listener. Oh, sorry, not element. Click button, and then we're gonna do, for example, click, right? And then we're gonna do a function that does. Sure, let's do alert button click. Right. And then what are we going to do? So what that does is let's go live and let's see what happens in our actual thing, right? If you see here in the HTML, you will see a click me. So this click me button will then be this click me here. And what we did is that we went in our scripts and we added an event listener that does a click, that registers when you click. So in theory, if you click it, it should alert. Does it? It does not.
Wait.
That means there's an issue. My bad. Yes, thank you. It is because I did not link the script to it.
I don't understand that.
Yes. Actually, give me a bit. Oh. Yeah, okay, so y'all can just try and write this in first, and then you can add your own function to what you want to do when that button has been clicked. Yeah. Actually, okay, so now I'm going to add it in for you. /. Right, so if I do this, it should work. Oh, and now the button is gone, of course.
I'm gonna put it like after the bottom.
Let me check.
Live debugging.
Live debugging.
Live debugging.
Oh, oh, whoa, 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 whoa. Right. Let's do. We did it. I know. Okay. I want to show. Here. So what we're doing now is that we are. There we go. And then do we. Ah. Oh my god. Oh my goodness. This is.
What is that, bro?
Deepen? That's right. I've had it. I've had it. Oh. Then should be where we do this. Oops. Okay. Let's try. Wait, action? Yeah. This is Apple. Where? What are you? What are you? Who are you? How do I get to your? Oh, it's
Right. Yeah. What the hell? Okay, is it not?
ridiculous.
I think it's there. I mean, holy hell, my laptop. Oh my god, it doesn't. Okay, now.
No. Where did we go? It's okay. We'll just go. Just go here. Where's the code? Is this it? And then let's. Where's the life? There we go.
Oh, my.
All right, guys. Sorry, I made a very rookie mistake just now. And if we manage to find the slides back, is here. Yes. What we have is the add event listener to make sure our DOM content is loaded, and then we define the button, and then we add a event listener to the button, which is, yeah, so I just had to make sure the DOM content was loaded. And yeah, you can do other things to it. For example, like mouse over. Like, for example, like, I don't know, focus, and then you can see what happens. Yeah. All right, I'm now just gonna go around and see what you guys have cooked up.
I go over and see any. Oh shit. Do you unplug anything? Yes, yes, yes. Oh. It's not another one.
all right, guys. Oh, it's not on. Okay. Hi. Okay, all right, guys. I hope you guys have more or less even out and iron out the kinks, but we are going to move on. Whoa! Now what are we gonna do is that I'm just gonna talk very briefly about browser APIs. What that is an interface, an application programming interface to allow web apps to interact with the browser. What that means is that it just lets you able to manipulate the DOM or handle events or make requests. And examples of that are, for example, the DOM API, Fetch API, which is used to make web requests, and also like web storage API. Okay, what is browser storage? So a browser storage is a part of web storage API, and what it does is, those websites that store some of your information when you come back, you can access the information again, or like it saves your progress in, for example, shopping, and then you come back to it. That's making use of browser storage, and there are two types of browser storage. What are they? They are local storage and session storage. A lot of things that basically what local storage does is it stays for longer and it stays after you close the browser. But session storage, it only exists for the session. Yes? Okay. So browser storage has local storage, stays for very long. Session storage stays for only that session and is clear when you remove it. How we can make use of it is a few one-liner commands that can just let you access your storage, local and session storage. It's basically that. You have your local storage set item, and then that will be the key and then the value. So what that does is that it just stores the username as whatever you input. And then when you retrieve it, you just do a get item, and then you can get the item. And then for session storage, it is the same thing, except you write session storage, and that is set item and then get item. So what it does is that it can save the things that you want to save into your browser, be it local or session. And what that means is that you can make it stay for longer or stay for only one session when you and clear when you close the browser. Yeah. So this chunk of code is in your JS, and if you want, you can type it into your JS, and it will save it into the storage, and you can retrieve it the next time you open the browser or whatever. Yeah. You guys clear with the concept of browser storage? So like local storage, session storage, longer, shorter time. Yep. So let's move on to talk about the Fetch API. With the Fetch API, we are going to make web requests. What are web requests is we are sending things to a server, to a web server that is elsewhere, and then we are getting responses back. And that uses the Fetch API from your JavaScript. It returns promises, and what it does, okay, there are 4 types of requests, which are get requests, post requests, put requests, and delete requests. These 4 are very important in API and requests. And what they do is basically you are asking a server to do things, and you're communicating with a web server that is elsewhere with these 4 commands, right? So get command, for example, let's say you guys are the server, right? And I say, I want to get drink, right? So I send the get request to them, and then they will send data back, and I will retrieve the data. Thanks. And then if I want to post, for example, I want to post the data to the server. I say post drink, right? Like post, and then the content will have drink. Then the server will receive this thing, right? If I want to put data, for example, I want to make changes to the data on the server, be it like database, which will be covered tomorrow actually, be it like database or like anything on that has an API is I put For example, I put air, and then I put air into this, and then now that thing is air, as you can see. Yeah. So yeah, so put is changing the data, and then we have delete, which is deleting data, which is yeah, okay, yeah, you get the point. So that's get, post, put, delete, which is all different functions, very important for APIs, and I just want you guys to know that these exist. Thank you for the drink, by the way. So what is fetch API and what does it do, right? Basically, a promise is an object that represents the eventual completion or failure of an async operation and its resulting value. What that means is that you ask the server to do something. And does the server do it? If it doesn't, then bad. Then it will be rejected. If the server does it, then it's successful, then it's good. If it's pending, then you're just waiting for it to finish. And that is a promise. It's the state of whether the server does something for you. So with web, you are basically sending requests here and there to everyone and then getting requests back and getting things back, data back. Yeah. So this is how a fetch API works. I know it's quite, it may be quite convoluted, but I will break it down step by step. You don't have to memorize all of this. You just, as long as you comprehend, it should be okay. So what we're doing here, firstly, we have fetch, right? This is the base of the fetch, of what you're doing in fetch. We might be going very fast, but just understand that this is the starting point. And then is then. So what happens then, right? Then is quite easy to comprehend. So then what happens? So the response, this is we're dealing with the response. If the response that we get is not okay, so exclamation mark represents not, right? If the response we get is not okay, the response we get from the server says no, bad. Then you say that's an error. You throw a new error and you say the network response is not okay. And then you return the response.json. So JSON data is just the data that you can get from the server, which is more like the raw data. And then what you want to do with it is you want to process it, right? So once you filter out the error, you catch the error, and then you get back the response, which is the data, right? What you want to do is that you want to process the data, and which is using this return response.json. You pass it from the response. What it does is that it just returns a readable data from the data that the server sends back. And then you console log data, that's it. Then the data will be console logged, and then it will, the last part is that you're just catching any errors that may come through. So what all of that does is that you're just communicating with the server, and you're getting some data from the server. Yeah. And then this is also basically what was happening from just now, except you're using the API URL from a separate variable. Yeah, and then you just do the same thing. And then you, for example, this is the api.example.com/users, blah, blah, blah. And then you fetch from that URL, which is the API URL. So in practicality, whenever you are dealing with APIs as a developer, you're going to go to their website, like the API's company's website or like the web page, and then you ask them, you get an API URL from them that you can request things from, or you can send things to. So from that API URL, you can get the response and then return the response from them, and then you store it as data, and then you are catching an error, and that's it. So that's the basic template of what is going on. And then for sending data, I know it looks like a lot, but what is the gist? TLDR, right? What's a TLDR? TLDR is you're sending a post request here, and then this is just the format of the request. So you're just posting something to it, and then you're telling them, oh, this is the user data, right? And then you're giving them this user data, and you're just catching any errors that come. Yeah. So you're just posting the data, handling it, and that is all. So this is just a simple walkthrough of what you do when you want to send things to the data and get something back as a response. Send things to the server. Wow, live demo. I hope we have time because we have 6 minutes. But let's see if we can do this. So what is the weather? We want to get the weather from if you can find it. Sure. We're going to look for.
Oh, what is this?
It's okay. Yes, thank you. Okay, so as you can see from just now, we already have, I already put in this bunch, which is the API key that I will not show you guys, and also the location, which is needed for the weather API. So what I'm gonna do is that I'm gonna communicate with the weather API server, with the weather server, and then what I'm gonna do is that I'm just gonna do this fetch bracket weather API URL, and that is defined here in this. So what I'm gonna do now is that I'm gonna do dot then, because that's what we're gonna do next. Then we're just gonna response, and then we do the response. We do this, and then we just throw new. Sorry, if the response is not okay, right? If the response is not okay, then we throw a. Oh my god, this. Then we throw an error, as we can see over here. If I don't make any typos. Error, right? And then after that, we return. So what we're doing here is that we're getting the response back from the server. And then after that, we are going to do another then, which is like this, dot then. What are we gonna do then is that we're gonna get the data to console log the data. Yeah. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna just do catch any errors that come. Console.error. Like so. Right. Right.
Is it a comma?
Right. Oh, we found it. Okay. Let's refer. Hi.
Okay.
Hi. Why is it? I feel like I missed something. Like so. And sorry. I will like to see. There we go. And after some minor debugging, this is basically the request that we're making. So we made a request to the weather API, and then we got some Singapore information from the API. As you can see here, yeah, we got our location data, we got our current data. It's currently 30.2 degrees. Wind speed, whatever, blah, blah, blah. So yeah, that's how you do fetch API. Yeah. All right, and that is the demo. I apologize if I didn't explain a lot of things clearly. But that is the basic workings of how fetch API works. Yes. All right, and for debugging techniques, Amanda will just briefly go through.
So those two are some sites that you might find helpful. So the first one is basically debugging JavaScript, and the second one is ESLint, which you can use.